story that must be told. Here's a little story that must be told. Here's a little story. Here's a little story.
Everybody knows me as Apple. I'm a tattoo artist. Originally, I'm from the Bay, from San Francisco. I came up here when I was younger, but I lived back and forth between here and Hawaii. I think the first time I was really hypnotized by graffiti was going across Bay Bridge or being in East Bay, like when I was real young, and I would just see graffiti like on the side of the buildings and see it on like the side of the freeway. And I remember like being in elementary school, like some of the first things that, you know, I was trying to emulate were writing letters. I started off with like the basic like graffiti S and then trying to figure out like what tagging was, but I must have been like in elementary school. Both my parents were artists, so I was always around it. Like my mom was always, you know, doing stuff with her photography. My dad did portrait like paintings, had cousins who danced. So part of the Filipino identity, you know, singing and just dancing and movement all together. I also grew up as a percussionist. I was in the Filipino drill team, and so I played kunga, I played, you know, timbales and more just percussion instruments. Learning that, you know, funk and soul and R&B, like there is a rhythm to it, and understanding like that connection, like it was like, you know, it was like natural. It was like breathing, like taking to it when it came to b-boying. Yeah, like most of my friends were all like breakers or very active, like doing graffiti. Like it was a huge part of just growing up. And some of the older crew members in Circle of Fire and Soul Shifters, they were in the high school that I had gone to, and I was an underclassman. You know, they'd bring me out to different shows and whatnot, and the b-boy culture. Like it was definitely fascinating because I knew that it was part of my foundation, you know, growing up. Like I'd been breakdancing, you know, ever since I was like 6 or something. Like that's when I first started breaking. I just thought that, you know, being able to move your body in that way was just sort of fascinating, you know. And I was kind of low-key into sports. Like I wrestled in high school. I think it was just more of like I had this energy that I wanted to get out. And I also had like a lot of just anxiety in general, you know, a lot of things that I was dealing with, like trying to understand like my home life, like trying to understand myself. You know, I wasn't really too comfortable in like my own skin. Like I didn't even know like who I was. Like I was just trying to figure out like my identity. My exposure to breakdancing wasn't necessarily directly influenced through hip hop because I grew up in Hawaii and there was more of like a party culture and like a rave scene over there where kids were doing house dancing. My foundation was definitely like house music as opposed to getting into hip hop, which was also part of my foundation, but I think my love for that type of music was a lot more deeper than my connection to like hip hop music. But being a dancer, you know, it's like music influences your movement. When it comes to breaking here, it was hard. I mean, it was hard, but it wasn't hard. It was hard in the sense of like it was hard on my body. You know, like I would hurt myself. I had come out of doing like a Arabian flip and I pivoted on this leg and I ended up tearing part of my Achilles. And so it took me quite a while to rehab from that. Basically, like I didn't want to stop dancing just because I had like an injury, and so I had a boot and I was still breaking while I had a boot on. And yeah, every time I hear music, like I couldn't help but dance because I can't be contained. And I had a lot of different injuries, you know, and each time like it definitely affected, you know, my mental well-being, you know. That was a big turning point. At different moments in those times it made me explore other sort of creative fields. There was many different outlets that I had, and I think a big contribution to that too is my brother. My brother's, you know, my brother's Rufio, one of the most talented people that I've ever met, and having him as a brother, you know, which is, you know, just an experience in its own. I think like the creative reflection of that was I had a master at something like that I could reflect on and be inspired by. As far as my training, a little bit of modern, different styles of modern, different styles of jazz, a little bit of like ballet foundation, hip hop choreo. I mean, a little bit of capoeira, a little bit of samba, a little bit of salsa, you know, b-boying, like straight up. Like I was a student of like breaking for a long time. I mean, there's a lot of teachers that I've had. Ken Swift, like Rocksteady Crew, like old school OG, like Alfredo, like Free, Orb, people from Barnyard Cannibals, Pele. I would say like Massive was definitely a big integral part of what I saw like visually. My friend Drew Lunar, he's definitely like a person who taught me a lot about breaking. A friend from back in Hawaii, John Himpivon, like taught me a lot about breaking that I still remember to this day. Just more like key ways to get into a certain movement. My interaction with dance has always been sort of like a spiritual connection. It's like a place of meditation, but it also teaches you about yourself. Hip hop kind of gave me a sense of like peace, that if I was in a dark place, like I could go and practice, like listen to music and just go and practice. Or if I, you know, was going through something in my mind, like I could just free write. I would say like anytime something went bad in my life, those were the bookmarks. Those were the biggest turning points of my life. And to me, like, I look at those as the most valuable parts. I got into MAD Krew and you know, being around like Danny and you know, Scene and Angel and Ryan and Devin and a lot of other people like Jelani and Daoud and many different people like that I met who are just amazing people, you know, in their own right, who've gone on to do like amazing things. Being part of MAD Krew, which to me was so unique because like our crew is just so positive. It was so great to have like these conversations, like these type of conversations. We're talking about like life and what we believe in and like what we're aligned to. When you create like any form of community, that's like the genesis of like of a culture, you know, like everything from the food to the style to the way that we talk, the way that we have interacted with, you know, society. And WTO was like going on too, like the World Trade Organization, riots were happening. Social justice, I feel, has always been sort of a core of like the community here. Into Their Madness was like a documentary that Danny and Brian put together, I believe. I mean, everybody like was involved with Enter the Madness, but I think it was actually one of the first like Seattle documents of hip hop culture. But yeah, it just documented like everything from like turntablism, you know, some of the highlights of like certain big shows that were happening, and it highlighted like lives of many different artists, you know, were coming up, and it was definitely a very underground tape, and I feel like it's a classic hip hop tape, you know. I even remember like where I was in the video, like I wasn't in the video a lot, but I was in the beginning, like in the intro, and I was like breakdancing on the ferry. I met people that I met like in other states and like other countries who were talking about like US hip hop, and they had Enter the Madness. You know, there were things that the crew were producing that a lot of people knew about, like Death Wish Breaks was like another one like that they had produced primarily for, I think, like DJs to use as a scratch tool. After I kind of stepped away from MAD Krew and whatnot, as I was getting into Barnyard Cannibals, Circle of Fire approached me, and I got into Soul Shifters. I was like one of the first Soul Shifters when Alfredo was starting to create like the second generation of Circle of Fire. So Circle of Fire, wow, it's crazy because I want to say like Circle of Fire is like probably one of the most influential dance crews in the sense of like dance crews. I would say that like the members that are down is like some type of Justice League, like Avengers. That's the way that I see them because they're all geniuses. They're all sort of masters of their expression. Inertia Dance Company was It was headed by a woman named Danielle Payton, and she had met me and a couple other people from my crew down at Seattle Center. Like, just super randomly, we were breaking in a circle, and so she invited us to come to her dance company. Ended up being part of her dance company for quite a while, and then she was also a member of DAISY, which is Dance and Child International, and we got to be ambassadors of peace for our run down in Brazil. We did like a month, down there, just kind of traveling around and learning a little bit about Brazilian culture. Our experience, being connected to our art form is a way to bridge like different cultures. So tattooing to me, like, has always been kind of like an extension of like graffiti. It's part of like the foundation of oceanic culture, like from the Philippines to most of Polynesia, Micronesia. Like within island culture, like tattooing is a big part of the identity of who we are. It's our connection to our culture. Tattooing comes from the Samoan word tatau. Tattoo as a word comes from Polynesia. And I came into tattooing really not by accident, but as like a way for me to support myself. One of my friends had said, "Do you want to come apprentice over at my tattoo shop?" And so he went and put a tattoo shop together, Imperial Soul Tattoo in Hilo, Hawaii. And first time I tattooed, with the actual machine, like the person who was teaching me said that, if you keep practicing, like, you're actually going to be really good because you have a very steady hand. When I came back to Seattle, I just did it. I just started doing it and then kept doing it. And then, here I am like 11 years later, doing it professionally. It's been an amazing journey. I feel like tattooing has made me a better artist. Where I knew how to do art, but tattooing, because it's such a flow and there's very little margin for error, it made me a faster illustrator and a more intuitive illustrator, where I could just draw without like any type of sketching, just drawing from my mind. I'm constantly learning, trying to redefine like the way that I interact with the machine and the needle and somebody's skin. Like, it's all something that on a day-to-day basis, it's just new territory. Well, like the people that I've been able to meet through tattooing who have no background in hip-hop or breaking or the other things that I deeply love, but being connected through tattooing is more, to me, like a humbling experience, because our points of connection have no real frame of reference except for tattooing. And so I get to learn like another dimension of life that I would have never done if I was just like so localized within like the culture of hip hop. That's been like the most transformative experience that I've had to date. That part of tattooing is probably like the best experience ever.